Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining Private Vista's trends, tips, and thoughts on today's crazy real estate market. I'm Nicole Young, and I am Private Vista's marketing coordinator. So before we get started, like I said, I'm just going to do really light housekeeping items to ensure that you have the best experience today. That will be one, everybody will notice that they are muted for the duration of the presentation. That's just to make sure that you can hear our panelists clearly and that there is no cross audio going on. Second, if you run into any technical issues or have any problems, feel free to reach out to me, Nicole Young, using the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I won't be on the screen the entire webinar, but you will be able to reach out to me and I will be in the back end available to help you out. Lastly, if you'd like to submit any questions during our webinar, please feel free to email me at pvnews@myprivatevista.com. That is where I will be live answering questions, feeding questions to our panelists if needing. So if you come across any questions you would like answered while we're speaking, again, just email me at pvnews@myprivatevista.com. Now, I'd like to introduce today's panelists, beginning with Mike McCabe. So Mike McCabe is a partner and lead financial advisor over at Private Vista. Throughout Mike's career in financial services, Throughout Mike's career in financial services, a primary focus has been assisting clients in the successful management of their lives so that they can enjoy and flourish in their real lives. Mike has always dedicated himself to learning. He's a CFP, a certified pension consultant, and has a designation from the American Society of Pension Professionals and Actuaries. Mike also serves on Private Vista's investment committee, helps with compliance, and mentors the firm's talented pool of younger advisors. So thank you so much for joining us today, Mike.
All righty, thanks.
No problem. So next, I would like to introduce Joan Wayman. Joan is a real estate agent with Keller Williams experience. As a trained engineer with a master's degree in real estate finance, Joan is trained to manage very complex situations, which ensures that her clients get to closing and obtain the highest value for their property. Through personal attention and professional staging, Joan creates an urgency around listings that translates into market engagement. Her numbers prove it, with 81.8% of her listings selling within 2 weeks at 97% of list price. Some amazing numbers there. So thank you so much for joining us today, Joan.
Thank you so much for having me.
And sorry, a quick note about Joan. You'll notice that she is kind of sitting in the dark today. Her power just went out. We are live from Chicagoland area, so bear with us while our powers and Wi-Fi's might be ebb and flowing. So just got to put that out there.
Joan is showing great adaptability today. She quickly switched over to a hotspot.
So bear with us on her internet connection. Sorry about that. But last but not least, I'd really like to introduce Paul Burkett. Paul is a mortgage loan officer with PNC Bank and has been a loan officer since 1992. Paul helps people with their purchase, refinance, and home equity needs. He believes that mortgage lending is a lot like being a financial planner, in that he's attempting to match a borrower with the right mortgage product and to meet their goals. It's much more important than ever to have a game plan when attempting to buy a home in 2021. And with all of his experience throughout the years, Paul can really help a buyer accomplish their goals. Thank you so much for joining us today, Paul.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So without further ado, I'm just going to turn things on over to Mike McCabe to get our webinar started.
All right, thanks, Nicole. Appreciate your help on this, getting things going. Today we've got, again, I'm honored to have these two panelists with me, people that I respect a ton in their various professions. Full disclosure here, I met Joan earlier this year when she was referred to us when my wife and I were selling our home in Westmont, and was super impressed by how she did it, her style, the way she talked about the house, but more importantly, just the way we started talking about how the business works. I like to talk shop with folks, and she was great. When I had the idea for this webinar, she was just a natural person to bring on as the real estate representative. So thanks, Joan. Paul, on the other hand, is a guy I totally respect, but I've also known him a very long time. Paul and I are brother-in-laws. Our wives are sisters. And I've known Paul for 16 years. He's been in the mortgage industry longer than that. And we've talked a lot of shop over the years. I've always been very impressed by his knowledge of how things work, the deals, things he has to do on behalf of trying to get the deals to close and how the mortgage market is just not that simple. And when I hear things he talks about again, I thought, boy, there's some things here that I think anybody would benefit from. So I really appreciate you guys being here today. Our agenda is kind of simple. We've got a kind of a 3-part agenda. One is we're going to talk about, maybe 4 parts. One is a little bit about the market, what's going on in the real estate market. Then we're going to take things from the perspective of a buyer. Third part will be taking things from the perspective of a seller. And then we'll wrap up with some what I'll call state of the industry questions for the realtor and the mortgage broker in our midst. So to get things started, Joan, I'll kick off with you. From the realtor's perspective, with dealing as you do with both buyers and sellers, can you give us a quick summary of what you see as the key factors driving what I'm going to call this red hot crazy market? Which I think we'd all agree it's a seller's market.
Yes. So I participate on a weekly Keller Williams call that gives us pretty much a state of the immediate state, as well as ties in multiple different inputs as far as where is the data coming from and what can we expect going forward. So super interesting. They believe we are on the forefront of from between now and 2025, one of the biggest buyers markets in history. It is reflecting closer to the baby boomer generation because the biggest number of people are coming into the biggest purchasing power of their lives. And who would that be? That would be the millennials. So as millennials graduate from college, getting really good jobs, now they have money to buy. Add in the fact that we jump-started it because with COVID, they didn't go out to eat. They didn't go on trips. So what I've seen on a local market level is these folks coming out of Chicago, they plan to live in Chicago for 2 or 3 years. And now they said, well, the restaurants aren't open. They haven't spent $20,000 in a year, which is probably what they would have spent on eating and drinking and going on vacations. Now they have these really big down payments with these really great virtual salaries. So now they can move to the burbs, which is kind of what we're seeing. We're just seeing an acceleration of a 2 to 3 timeline, 2 to 3 year horizon, kind of compressed into a shorter time. But like the market industry says, or the experts, based on available inventory, we're going to still see that price pressure and demand kind of playing along for the next number of years.
It doesn't feel as, I mean, if I'm wrong, it doesn't feel as hot or crazy as it did maybe a few weeks, a couple months ago. I feel like in the last couple of my bike rides through the neighborhood or driving through that I've seen for sale signs that are up for more than a week, or I don't see every for sale sign I saw in the spring seem to say contract pending or sold on it. So am I wrong there?
No, you're right on. So if we look at the market statistics in all of the MLS for Northern Illinois, Chicagoland, April 12th was the highest percentage of homes under contract of the market. So to give you an idea, in LaGrange, their peak was actually May 3rd. They had 24.4% of homes under market. As of last week, August 2nd, they had 3.2% of homes. And from 40 to houses as of last week available for sale. So what we're seeing at the end of this, people put their homes on the market, people trying to get into the market for school and to be in their house for the timeline. And they hurried up the contract, and now we're starting to see a.
All right. So there's that, Jones, our visual.
They're getting ready for school. Okay. So, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're in and out there, but we're good. But
yeah. So people are going on vacation. We'll have another surge probably the middle of September is when the next real, once everybody settles down from their summer vacations and goes back to work, then they start looking again in September. So that's kind of what we're looking at. I was just going to see if there was anything else that I could bring you guys, but I think that's pretty much, kind of expect a hot market to continue.
Okay, and we got lots of good questions and ground to cover, so that's great. Thank you. So Paul, I know we've got a series of questions lined up for you on the financing side, but anything at this point you want to chime in about with the current environment we're in?
Yeah, I just would probably reiterate what Joan just said, is that it's a very competitive market right now. And I expect that to continue for the next several years. I also believe what Joan is saying, and what her real estate firm is saying as well, is that with this younger generation, they're going to have the ability to be mobile. And it's a great setup for somebody who's in their 20s or early 30s and could potentially move to another state, move to the suburbs, live downstate, and get such a huge bang for their buck, because they're going to be able to move, live out of their house and work out of their house. So I think that'll be a big component. And then I would also say that the biggest part when it comes to the financing part is truly having a game plan and understanding what your limitations are up front, because in essence, you're either going to have to try to buy something without it being contingent on the sale of your home, or you're going to try to buy something, or you're going to absolutely 100% have to sell your home. And you need to know what your limitations are right up front. So it's very important to talk to someone like myself, talk to a mortgage banker, and see what your capabilities are going to be in this market.
Okay. So yeah, so as we kind of move into the buying part of our side, some of the stuff, many of our clients, people that I know, they haven't purchased or sold a home for 10 or 15 years and are now venturing out there. So kind of I'm curious, like what's different from a decade or two ago? And more to the point of today's talk on the current environment, what key advice do you have for those buyers who will be financing their new home, whether it's in this traditional or the jumbo market? I know there's some differences between those.
Well, I think the biggest thing is if we go back 10, 15 years, we're almost at a 180 from where we are right now. And what I mean by that is today is a market where homes are being sold and under contract in record times. If you go back to 2010, 2011, 2012, we were just coming out of the financial crisis. If you go back history over the last couple of decades, we saw appreciation levels zoom and kind of hit a crescendo in about 2006. And then probably, I'd say August, September of 2007, that's when we started seeing the hints of the market going in the other direction, and things in property values came down dramatically. So if you were trying to buy something in 2010 or 2012, you had all the leverage as the buyer, where today the seller has all the leverage. You could have bought a property back in 2010 or 2011, walked into a home, thought about it, said, I'm going to think about it, slept on it. You could have slept on it for a week. You could have slept on it for a month. And then you could have made an offer. More than likely, you would have received that, been able to make a deal, and probably under list, probably 5% under list, maybe up to 10% below list. So truly a marketplace that was a 180 from where it is right now. I think the other thing that's different than what was going on 10, 15, 20 years ago is all the technological advances in this industry. I think of the fact that with all the real estate sites out there, I don't know the exact percentage, but the average person starts their site even before calling the realtor or calling the mortgage guy, et cetera, or the builder. They start looking online. They're on a realtor.com, they're on a Zillow. They start looking at homes, getting an idea of what's out there, what they think they can purchase. So you see a lot of advances because of all the numerous websites that are out there. And then from a technology standpoint, I see scenarios where more than likely in 2005, I was meeting face-to-face with my client, having them go bring in everything in the kitchen sink in terms of documentation, making copies there, and then telling the customer probably a week later, hey, I still need more stuff. And I know no one likes to hear that, but there have been great advances now. People are much more computer savvy. A PDF is not a foreign thing to them anymore. So now, whereas I would have met with somebody in person 15, 16 years ago, had them bring all their stuff in, now we pretty much do all of our conversations over the phone or text or email. They scan their information to me. We take a quick telephone application, and that's really how everything's done now. And I think from a documentation standpoint, it's even going to get better as time goes on. I do think we're going to get to the point where I'll get your bank statements from the cloud. I'll see your tax returns from the cloud. You almost won't have to give me anything other than some basic biographical information.
Wow. Okay. Interesting stuff. I when I hear tax return on the cloud, I get a little like, what? But
they'll sign a form that authorizes you to do that.
That's for another day. All right. Let's talk about, we had some interesting conversations about developments in the second home and vacation home area. Can you fill us in on what you think may be of interest to listeners today who are looking at that kind of a purchase?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give you a little bit of background here. When you get a mortgage with anybody, PNC, Chase, Wells Fargo, the likelihood of that mortgage staying with that particular lender is highly unlikely. It's going to be sold off to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We'll service the loan, or Chase will service the loan, et cetera, but that loan's going to be sold off to Fannie and Freddie Mac. So earlier this year, back in April, Fannie and Freddie said, hey, the percentage of all these loans we have in our portfolio is getting too high. It got to a point where second homes and investment properties represented 7% of their entire portfolio. Well, they want that percentage to be at 5% or less. Okay, so when you think about 7%, you go, well, that's only 2% more, but it's actually 40% more than what they really want. Okay. So what happened? We saw down payment requirements become a lot stronger for second homes and investment properties. If you had contacted me in February and said, hey, I want to buy a second home down in Florida, I could have helped you and had you buy that with as little as 10% down and at 0 points. Now, I don't have that ability. You're going to have to put down at least 20%. And if you don't put at least 25% down, you're probably going to pay a significant amount of points. Likewise with investment properties, whereas I could have helped you with putting as little as 20% down, now that requirement is 30% down and with a significant amount of points associated. If you think about it, Fannie and Freddie is, I think, trying to protect themselves, and rightfully so, especially when you consider what's going on with rentals right now, where the landlords aren't getting paid by a lot of their tenants. So I think this was a way to offset people buying second homes and then trying to flip them, and then also to protect themselves, because a lot of the investment properties I think are going to go sour because a lot of people absolutely need that rental income in to make those payments.
Okay. Good information there for sure. Kind of switching tacks a little bit, for those that are faced with that need to purchase their new home before they get their proceeds from their current home. They over the years, people have used the term bridge loan, and I think that might be a little bit too simplistic type of thing. And then in our conversations, you guys have talked about the phrase recast loan. So I believe there's been some developments in this area that our folks should be aware of. I think you both maybe have some insight. So maybe Paul, you first, and then Joan, if you got something to add.
Sure. I think bridge really means finding a way to buy the new home without having to sell your current home. Technically, there are exactly what that term is. A bridge loan's out there. PNC doesn't offer that. A lot of banks don't offer it. I would avoid a hardcore bridge loan because there are generally points associated with it, closing costs associated with it, and a time element. That bridge loan has to be paid off within 6 months or 9 months or 12 months. It balloons out. So I'm not a big fan. And what I think makes more sense is to try to obtain a home equity line of credit if you've got a lot of equity in your home, because there's no application fee, there's no closing cost. there might be a small prepayment penalty associated with a home equity line, but essentially you're trying to grab the equity from your current home in order to use that as the down payment for the new purchase, provided you're going to be able to qualify for all of this. And you do have to, again, goes back to you have to have a game plan. You need to talk to the loan officer first before you start doing the home equity line. But I'll give you a quick example. If I had a home that was worth 300,000 and I had a first mortgage of 100, I could probably go up to a combined loan to value of 90%, which would be 270 in this case. So technically what my thought process would be is, again, assuming you qualify to be able to withstand this debt and buy the new home, you're basically trying to get an advance on the 170. So you get a line for 270, you pay off that 100, you get an interest only home equity line of credit going up to 270,000. You're essentially getting 170 that you would have utilized if you sold the home tomorrow, and you tap into that and you go ahead and use that for the downstroke on the new property. And it's extremely cheap money. The prepayment penalty is going to be probably $300 to $500 if you pay off the home equity in 3 to 5 years within the first 3 years generally. So my recommendation is get a large home equity line. Let that be your bridge financing.
Okay.
As it relates, go ahead.
I was going to say, Joan, your thoughts on this topic as far as the recast world or the cash equivalent phrase that you used?
Yeah, so because the market is so tight, cash equivalent loans are being prioritized because we have multiple offer situations, so the sellers can be choosy on who they select. So anytime you can find a cash equivalent, whether it's the home equity line of credit, so you can buy it outright before you sell, or anything to remove that home sale contingency will help you win. And Mike, I think you're the guy who can, investigate other options as far as,
Sure.
especially because let's say maybe you're farther along in your career, you might be downsizing, but you need to buy first because you have so much stuff in your house and it's crazy to sell with people walking through your house. We've had 50 showings on a house in a weekend. So if you can buy first, Mike, maybe I've had situations where buyers pledged against their assets. You have alternate ways,
Yes,
I've heard, to do that. So maybe
Yeah.
explain that for everyone.
There's, margin loans that we borrow from friends. When that term cash equivalent, as we talked about, to me, just means you're telling the seller, don't worry about it. At closing, I'm going to have cash. There's no financing contingency. I'm covering it through whatever means I'm going to come up with. And certainly margin loans and, taking money out temporarily from your 401k, all options that have ramifications that should be talked about with advisors like us, or whoever you get some advice from. But lots of options. I guess one of the themes is you want the seller to believe you're a cash buyer. That's probably the gist of it. All right, so I think Joan,
On that also, we're seeing it. I was just going to say, sometimes for the children to win the house, that parents will with the children to also kind of solve that cash equivalent problem.
Yeah, a short-term loan or even gifting if it were to happen. Okay, appreciate that. The next question I kind of wanted to go to for you, Joan, was to me, there's lots of interesting developments we're seeing in this contract language between buyers and sellers. Especially when there's multiple offers involved, things like appraisal addendums and escalator clauses and inspection waivers. Can you talk to that new stuff a little bit?
Sure. To give you an idea of how hot the market was, I referenced one of our listings from the time it went live on Thursday till we took a deal Monday morning. It had 80 groups come through the house. We had 11 offers. 4 of those offers were had cash equivalent opportunities, meaning that either they had so much money down and so much money in the bank that getting a loan was a no-brainer. I think both of them had over 50% down or something. But they did 2 things. Number one was they listened to the sellers. So in this case, the seller had to be out on a certain day. I've had other situations where the seller will ask to rent back. So let's say they're buying a house that the floors need to be replaced. They need 2 weeks before so they want to rent their current home back from the new buyer for 2 weeks while the floors in their new home are being done. So they call that a rent back.
Okay.
We also have an inspection waiver. So it says, we're not going to do an inspection. We've already walked through the house. It looks pretty good. We're good. You can maybe go back in the house, but it's not, they're not, you can still do the inspection, but they waive that portion of the attorney review period so that the seller knows the buyer will ask for nothing. It's similar to as is, but it's not quite. But as is means that you still have a right to do the inspection. But in as is, if there is some huge limiting issue, like for example, the foundation's falling in or whatever, you can investigating to find it. Blah, blah. The appraisal waiver. Let's say you have down, you have a loan. The appraisal waiver allows you the seller to say, if my price is $450 and the appraisal comes in at $425,000, you, Mr. Buyer, are on the hook for that $25,000 spread. As we get to more expensive house, spread can become bigger. It can be $100,000. It's because appraisals are usually about 6 weeks behind the market. So we don't have the closing figures for the recent. So let's say 2 weeks ago, a house went under for $40,000 than the market, but we don't have that number in writing because it hasn't been recorded yet it's on the MLS, but not recorded. So it takes a while for the appraisers to get that data into their books to use it as a comparable.
Good.
So
yeah, good, useful stuff. And we had a question there about what it takes to win the purchase contract, but I feel like you've covered most of those points. Was there anything else, other points you wanted to add to?
Yeah, no, it's just listen to what the seller wants, because we're going to be in the seller's market for a while. Right. And for the seller's perspective, it's the same thing. Everybody, don't assume that you know what the seller wants, because it might not be money. They may just want the assurance that they'll be able to close and move on with their life. You just can't always assume it's the price point.
Right. Good point. Good point. Paul, we have time for a question. I want to make sure I just touched on it, because refinancing, you do a lot of work in both the original mortgages and the refinancing area. Kind of quickly, are any developments you're seeing in the refi world that might be useful to folks who are staying in their home but have an existing mortgage?
Right. Well, we were talking a little bit earlier about technological advances. One of the things that I'm seeing quite a bit is with a lot of loans where I've got customers who have a decent amount of equity, is we're getting what are known as property inspection waivers. So I enter a loan, I run it through automatic underwriting, and again with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, and whatever their algorithms are that determine this, if I put a value is, I think the possible value of this home is 400,000, and I'm doing a mortgage for 250, I have a pretty decent amount of equity. I might get a property inspection waiver, so I don't need to get a formal appraisal, which is great. And so we avoid having to pay basically about $500 for an appraisal, and it speeds up the time in order to close. And then I think the other thing that I'm seeing is a lot of people going from 30-year mortgages to shorter terms, either 20 or 15. I think more so than ever, people really want to be done with their mortgages faster, take advantage of, getting a 15-year rate with a 2-handle and being able to save thousands over time. So I think going to shorter terms is probably the biggest thing I've seen over the last.
It's certainly something that I tend to pay focus on clients. I get upset with somebody when they tell me they had a 30-year mortgage and they paid on it for 10 years and then they got another 30-year mortgage. And I'm like, now you're paying off your house over 40 years. But they're like, yeah, but the payment's lower. And I'm like, so I try to push them into something that's in the 15-year range. We'll switch gears here and kind of head over to the selling side. Joan, I don't know if we've got you there or not. I see the screen's a little frozen, but I hear you.
Oh, there. Now I'm back.
All right, good. Let me ask
Sorry.
this question. So,
What was the question?
yes, Yeah, so the question is just about the multiple offers scenario. People, there's probably some sellers now who are expecting multiple offers, maybe over list price, but my observation is that's not for all types of homes. I mean, what do you see out there as far as what's the hottest, I guess?
So it's a big spread. We have homes that are, there's an opportunity right now for sellers. It's the first time in a really long time people are not underwater. So they can finally sell their house without coming to the closing table with a check, with some money for the bank. But now that they're able to sell, a lot of times the homes are in not such great condition. So sometimes we have this on the lowest end of the market. There are fewer people who have the ability to buy the house and a big chunk of cash to fix up the house for their needs. So the homes that are in the highest demands are the ones that have the least amount of work to be done. Those always have the biggest number of showings, the biggest number of multiple offers. So ultimately, it's the basics that need to be done in order for a buyer to really want to go over the finish line. I guess that's the easiest way to put it, because we are not seeing multiple offers in different scenarios. I'd say the sweet spot for multiple offer situation would be from about 250 in a house to about 500. We are seeing multiple offers over 500, but it's a smaller marketplace. So it depends upon which locale you're in. It depends upon, location. There are a whole lot of factors, but on the lower, because it's more affordable, rates are really good right now. People are up in their purchasing power about, I think I've heard 50,000 to 100,000 in that, they used to be able to buy at 250. Now they can buy at 325.
Yeah.
So it's putting a lot of demand pressure right in that sweet spot. So we are seeing multiple offers
And
right
one
there.
thing that we're seeing on our side of the house is just, with the investment markets being up as nice as they are, people feel wealthier. And, and sometimes we'll even oftentimes encourage folks, hey, if that's your dream house and you feel like you're paying 20,000 more for it, but you're going to be happy there, okay, it's okay, do it, because that's what matters to you. So it is interesting that the markets have helped, I think, this as well. The one thing on the selling side, if I've got you there, Joe, so I'm going to ask the question. So we've got clients talking about, what improvements should I make? What should I put into the house before I try to sell it? And, heck, we went through this when you were selling our house a few months back. What should we do? What shouldn't we do? So your thoughts be kind of like what people shouldn't do versus things like, I think about things that are sort of repairs and things you kind of got to do to improve marketability versus the concept of I'm going to make an improvement and therefore I'm going to put something into the property and then make more on it. Differences there. Your thoughts on do's and don'ts?
So number one improvement you can make is paint. For every dollar spent on paint, you get 3 times that back. However, picking the paint color is the number one problem. And if 70, you like a creamy kind of peach. It's like a pinky peach beige. The young people like a agreeable gray. So it's very important that you pick the right color. I have a team, we come out, we give you examples. The other thing is, if you're going to stay in your house 2 years, maybe doing a bathroom is a good idea. Be very selective on what you're choosing, because if you think of selling a house, people want to buy a hotel room. They don't want personality. They want neutrality. It's not exciting. Unless you're an interior designer who sells a bunch of books, you're probably going to be a little limited on the purple shag. But, it's just, but if you're going to be in your house for 5 years, make the investment, enjoy it until 2 to 5 years. If you're going to stay, do the bathroom, but don't do the bathroom 6 months before you're about to move. There are some tweaks we can do for really inexpensive. We can paint cabinets. We can throw a countertop on. Low hanging fruit. Those vanities at Menards are $200. It's like $500. You get a new vanity, but I'm not saying go replace. A lot of low hanging fruit, you over the finish line to get because the number one tool in my toolbox and the seller's toolbox is the or how product, treat it like a, not what do you want to see, but what do 80% of people want to see. And so that's what we're trying to get your product, paint yellow. I've sent back photographers probably 3 times because the pictures look too yellow. It's because it's the yellow paint. That's why you have to be really, really specific on, those are the people who didn't call me to get the picture, the color.
Interesting. Thank
It's,
you for that. That's good insight. We caught most of what you had to say. We got a little choppy in there, but the most of it was good. And the paint thing to me is just the coloring, the staging thing is right on, because when I was selling my house, I have no idea what the buyers are looking for, because what we like, my wife and I might think this is what, well, people are going to love this. And sometimes it takes that honest third person to come in and say, yeah, not so much. That yellow shag just ain't going to cut it, So,
No, yeah,
all right, we're going to kind of switch. I keep kind of going down here on the seller side and talk a little bit about the rental world, the rental options. Meaning, and I'll go to both of you guys. Paul first. What advice do you have for those clients who are thinking about selling a home because they're happy to be selling in this market, but they are wary of being a buyer in this market? And what are your thoughts on that rental option? Paul, you go first.
Sure. My belief is that everything's relative. And what I mean by that is, yes, if you're selling your house today and maybe you're going to get $25,000 or $50,000 more than you would have 12 months ago. And you should probably expect to see the same depending on the price point on the buy end. But I think it's, if you're thinking, I'm going to sell my home because I can make 50 grand more than I could have 12 months ago, and then I'm going to rent and hope that the market comes down, then I'll buy. Boy, you're smarter than I am. So
that sounds like market timing to me.
Yeah, that sounds like market timing, and it sounds like that's almost a fool's game. I'd say this, the only time I really see it making sense for somebody to rent would be, let's say somebody maybe in their 70s or 80s who has a huge chunk of their net worth in that house, no longer needs all the space, no longer needs all the maintenance, and renting might make a lot of sense for somebody like that who has a lot of net worth in their home and they need to tap it. And that's probably the only time, because I always say this to clients, when you're renting, you are paying a mortgage, you're just paying somebody else's.
Great point. Yeah, good one. Joan, thoughts there?
I sample. And right before COVID, couldn't make up her mind. She had proceeds from, and she just could not handle the prices going. We found her beautiful townhomes, 227 shaded too. She got cold feet, fell out, said, I'm just rent. She has now watched the market go up. So now she's paying a higher price. I've calculated she's at least out $35,000 for 2-year renting and rental payments. To mention, she doesn't have the tax.
Okay. You
To the market timing.
There.
Sorry.
Yep, that's right. I know it's tough. You're working in the dark, but you're doing great. So I would got most of that. So I will. I guess my 2 cents on the loan side is, or the rental side is, for folks who are making kind of that big move, like, hey, I'm going to sell my house and I'm going to move to Florida, or I'm going to move to Arkansas, or I'm going to move to Tennessee, whatever. Until they're really sure where they want to be, I'm very comfortable with that renting option, because it's sort of take your time. Because if you want that next purchase to be something you really want versus some kind of regret, because it's just you're so stressed out about selling your house, maybe you're not thinking about buying it, which kind of leads to my kind of closing question on the selling side of things. Are there any other important additional advice for our listeners who are perhaps super focused on the sale of their house, that they might not be thinking about that next purchase, things they should be thinking about ahead of time? Paul, if you wouldn't mind, I know you maybe have some thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I think number one, you might get excited and go, boy, if we sold our house tomorrow, we can get whatever, $500,000, but you still got to go somewhere. And then, so I think you still ultimately need to want to buy something if you're going to sell something. I don't think you can get so caught up in the market and go, boy, we could get this much, unless you do have a game plan, which again, I always speak to, you have to have a game plan. And in one thing I know I would never do is I would never list my property and start selling it, assuming that I can purchase something new without getting pre-approved first for a new mortgage. And the reason I say that is I've seen several times in my career where somebody who looks great on paper, makes a lot of income, et cetera, and then we run credit and the credit is a disaster. And they never thought it was going to be a disaster, but it's a disaster. There's something on there that they never realized, and it's too late. And I can't even get them a mortgage because the scores are so low, even though they make great money. So don't make those kind of assumptions. Make sure you get pre-approved first before you even list your house, and have the game plan and go, hey, are you going to sell this or not sell this? Can we make this happen? So you really have to think it through.
Okay. And on that vein, a question that I know has come up with you and I working together on some of our clients who you've helped with great advice over the years. The retiree that has lots of assets, but just has a social security income and maybe takes money out of their IRAs because they, once in a while they have to take some money out. There's no real pattern of income. And I've heard you say in the past that getting some kind of established pattern of income, if you're going to finance your next home, could be a good idea. And that seems like one of those thinking ahead type things.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of people out there who have a lot of assets, but they don't have a lot of income. And one thing that I've done, and I do it not several, but 3 to 5 to 6 times a year with clients, is I go, hey, look, in order to make this work, we can get a letter from your financial planner having you take out X amount of dollars a month, so we can show that as an IRA distribution. You'll do it for 1 month, perhaps it's $10,000. The key for us is that we have to show that you have 3 years of continuance. So let's say the number was $10,000 out of an IRA, so I can allow you to purchase that home that you want. If you've got $360,000 in that IRA, you're going to be fine because we got 3 years of continuance. We show a letter, we show 1 month where that 10,000 goes from your IRA to your checking account, and we've got your income pattern. Even if last year you were showing you made $50,000, you're going to do it for 1 month and then talk to your financial planner and go, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah.
And you're fine, but you've met the requirement to purchase the home, which is the key to the exercise.
Yeah. Is that check in the box, I guess, to get through?
That's right. It's check in the box.
Yeah. Thoughts on your side of that, Joan? Anything to add there as far as kind of, having that the seller be looking ahead to their next buy?
So without fail, as people get farther on in years, they think, oh, I can clean out my house, no problem. And it's an exhausting race to the finish.
I'm chuckling because I know my wife somewhere is thinking, is nodding her head like that is exhausting.
Yeah.
And I did help, just to be clear. I helped a little.
Yeah, it's exhausting. It takes so much more time than you expect. I think when you close your closets at night, all the little things in your closets and cabinets end up having babies and they multiply. And then you go to move and you have 3 truckloads and you had no idea. And then you have to move it into the new house and unpack it. So I suggest a year, 2 years, 3 years before you're considering selling, call me, call my fellow compadres. Let us come out and start helping you pick the paint colors, helping you identify what pieces to stay, or maybe, give with the grandchildren, because it is very, very difficult to part with very special objects at the very end, and you get really sad, and it's a very emotional time. So we really want to kind of make that a more joyful time and be excited about where you're going. One more thing. People are always stressed out. They know they need to move. They have no idea where they're going. However, once they know and they've started that process, I can advise myself, so maybe calm field trips. I'm going to go on a few field trips, check out a few places, the price point, check out the amenities. Someone knows where they're going. All of a sudden, all signs point to yes. And they're excited, and it makes the process a lot more you have a plan. It's a lot easier.
Yeah, good points. Good points. All right. Well, thanks, you guys. We covered a lot of ground on the buyer and seller side. A couple of questions to kind of wrap up. We're doing pretty good on time here. A couple of things. I just wanted to ask you guys as objectively as you can some about developments, what I'll say in your industry, right? And Joan, I'll start with you first. That there's so much, as Paul was talking about, so much house shopping work is done online, and there's a proliferation of services and products that complement what you do, and oftentimes I suppose compete with what you do, with what a full, with a full service professional agent like you does. So I'd say as objectively as you can, what advice and insights can you offer to sellers and buyers considering handling their own transactions, the for sale by owner market, or utilizing the discount or flat fee online brokers you see like Redfin or others?
So I can tell you a couple of things. Zillow's numbers are not correct. So what Zillow says your estimated value is, I would say 9 times out of 10 is incorrect, because it's not taking into consideration the micro location or the condition. So get a price opinion. But when you go to sell on your own, even though for sale by owner has a really snazzy website and a low price to enter, you can just burn that money because no one sees it. Example, as a for sale by owner on Zillow, I actually now list had 3 offers, but not one of them went. I'm like, if it was good, why didn't it close? Which now meant my seller missed the 3 greatest months of all time in the market. And now she's going to sell for probably 10 grand less than she would have if she had listed it with me originally. So it's just like, why waste your time and lose money because you're not getting your product in the best light possible with the best pictures, best staging, best overall product presentation to the greatest market exposure. If you're not dealing with a professional, you're not going to get the price back. And we will negotiate, ask Mike, really good agents will negotiate, and you will more than make up whatever you're paying me. So
yeah, I'm obviously a fan of your industry. I found it helped a lot of people, you helping people and other people helping. So I'm biased in that I think the role of the professional was helpful, but we know that's out there. I want to make sure I ask for sure. Paul, on your side of the house, when we think about financing, as we wrap up here, again, as objectively as you can, please provide your advice and insights for the buyers who are evaluating their various lender options, examples that include the traditional bank-based mortgage professionals like yourselves, independent or unaffiliated mortgage broker, which I know you were at some point, and then the online lendings that you see now. I every day I see an ad for Rocket Mortgage. So
Right.
Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you're going to see more and more online mortgage houses. I also think you're going to see a lot of consolidation in the industry. There's some major banks that don't want to do mortgage, period. And then there's other banks that really want to do it. So I think you're going to see a lot more consolidation. When it comes to brokers and when it comes to online, I think, 2 things that I always get the question asked all the time. What's my rate? What are your closing costs? Well, make sure that when you're comparing, compare shopping, make sure you're asking the right questions. So in other words, when it comes to closing costs, I'm pretty darn specific. I point out whether it's a refinance or a purchase, I talk about, hey, these are our fees, the lender fees. Here are the title fees. And then here are the outside vendor fees. There's 3 sets of fees. And you want to be specific about it, because when it comes, if they then get on the phone and start talking to somebody, the next person, that person might say, well, our closing costs are X, but they failed to say that that's not including title, that's not including closing costs. So that's kind of shady way to say it. And I don't like that. And then also, as it relates to interest rates, if whoever you're talking to doesn't ask you any questions and just quote you a rate, that rate means nothing. You have to be so specific, because your rate is determined by the loan amount, because there's tiered pricing. Your rate is determined by the loan to value. the purpose of the loan. If you're doing a cash out refi versus a rate and term refi, that's going to be a different rate. And your
I
credit
love that
scores.
lingo, man. You got all that lingo, you know.
You have to know all of these things. And if you don't ask, if they're not asking you that, they're just giving you a rate, and they're probably telling you the rate best case terms without knowing what your situation is. And if that person has a 670 score with a 90% loan to value, they're not getting the best rate. I can tell you that. Right. They just won't. So I think it's really important to ask those questions. And then I think finally, the one thing I would be a little adverse to is if I was doing a purchase and I was dealing with an online lender, I just think there's so many things where I have to step in and fix things. I don't know how easy that's going to be in a scenario where you're dealing with somebody online. And I can give you a perfect example. 2 nights ago, and this is the first time this has ever happened to me in my life, somebody is doing their walkthrough, and I get a call from the walkthrough telling me the guy just got his results from his COVID test. He has COVID. He's supposed to close the next day at 9 a.m. So I had calls with the attorney, the realtor, et cetera. We did not close the next day at 9 a.m. because he couldn't attend, but it's probably going to close tomorrow. And we're working on the power of attorney today, and the sister's going to sign, and it'll all get worked out. But these weird things happen. And I've had closings where I've been a closing where the seller hasn't moved their stuff out of the house. So I know Joan has seen that, where you see this bizarre stuff. Right. So I think I look at it as I manage the loan, and when a bizarre issue happens like this with the COVID, it's just you go into solution. How are we going to solve this? Okay, we can't fix that he has COVID, but how are we going to solve this? How are we going to get it to close?
All right.
And
Joan, I know you want to add something here. I saw you making faces and waving your head, so please do. Go ahead.
Completely. So when we're finding out that we're going to close because we don't get the clear to close, it's within the 7 days before the actual closing. I have had situations with online banks or online mortgagers. We've got no physical body to grab onto to say, what is going on? Why do we not have this clear to close? In the meantime, my sellers are all packed and ready to go. So at least dealing with Paul or someone in person, we have a relationship, we have a communication. We're not hiding behind a 1-800 number or even behind just a number, because it gets really scary at the end of the days whether or not we're going to close, because they may not be available when you really need them. So I 100%, Paul, I cannot be more excited that you're in person.
Thank you, guys. All right, thanks. We're going to wrap up here in a second, but I got time for one. We got a couple of questions online, and one of them was, do we think rates are going to go up? And rates are going to fluctuate. I know I can't answer it, but I'm going to say yes. I've been saying yes for a long time. I think interest rates will go up. I wouldn't be waiting around for lower rates, anytime soon. A more interesting question we got was a good question from Liz. She said, would it be possible to cover the pros and cons of taking a small mortgage at low interest rates when in retirement versus pulling funds out from investments to cover a funding gap when looking to make a home move in retirement? And what I take that to mean is this, what I call mortgage arbitrage, saying, I've got a portfolio, I can borrow at 3%. Do I really want to cash out my investments and maybe pay some taxes and and maybe give up a higher rate of return down the road, just not to have a mortgage? And for a lot of people, I'll say, if you're comfortable with making a debt payment, if you're comfortable with it, yeah, I think your money's probably better off, no guarantees, but probably better off staying invested to the extent you're comfortable. Certainly for folks who don't want to have debt, fine, it's your choice. It's just kind of weigh that idea that if I take some money out of the portfolio, what are the tax implications and how do I feel about that? So that's definitely that measure twice, cut once. And Liz, if we didn't answer your question specifically well enough, either myself or one of our advisors here, if you work with us, we'll get back to you on that. But that was, we had an hour set aside and we made our way through it. And I think we got there good. I'm going to say a few things, and then Nicole, if I mess up, please hop on. But there's likely going to be a replay of this. It has to go through our compliance department to see if any of us said something we shouldn't. On the screen here is just basic contact information. We're going to get an email out to everybody who's attending the seminar today with Joan and Paul's specific information if you need to contact them or contact us here at Private Vista. If you have any questions that we didn't address or something popped into your head, please, as Nicole said, send them to her at, I think it's pvnews@myprivatevista.com. And, you know, we so appreciate you guys attending today that we want to get any questions that come up answered. And I think with that, Nicole, did I cover what we need to?
I think you got it all, Mike.
I did. All right, terrific. All right, Joan, I appreciate you battling through your logistical issues there. Paul, great seeing you, and thank you so much for all you guys for coming on. I'm sure it showed in the conversation here, but I'm a big fan of both of you. So again, thanks to everybody. Thanks to you for all those who attended today. We really appreciate you joining us. And that is all. All right. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye now.